My name is Eleanor, and at 31, I felt like I was constantly navigating a quiet battle against myself. My opponent wasn't a formidable foe from the outside world, but rather the stubborn, unwelcome guest on my back, acne. It wasn't just a few spots. It was a persistent, often inflamed landscape that had stubbornly clung to me since my early teens. It wasn't life-threatening, of course, but it was a silent, constant hum of self-consciousness, especially when summer rolled around. The thought of bearing my back in a swimsuit, or even a low-cut dress, filled me with a familiar dread that no amount of positive self-talk seemed to fully dissipate. This particular summer, though, the allure of the ocean was too strong to resist. My family, a small but intensely connected group, decided on a beach day. It was just my mother, Beatrice, a woman in her early 50s who possessed an effortless warmth and an uncanny ability to soothe any rough edges. My younger brother, Daniel, 28, a steady presence who was usually my confidant and sounding board, and his wife, Sophia, 26. Sophia was a relatively new addition to our family orbit. Daniel and she had only been married a year, and while she seemed genuinely lovely, with a quiet, almost ethereal sweetness about her, I hadn't had much opportunity to really get to know her beyond polite conversation at family dinners. Daniel, always a little reserved himself, seemed to bloom in her presence, becoming more outgoing and relaxed. It was clear he adored her, a deep, quiet devotion that I admired. The drive to the coast was filled with the usual familial chatter. Beatrice recounted a funny anecdote from her work, Daniel teased me about my overly organized beach bag, and Sophia offered soft giggles at his jokes, occasionally adding a gentle comment about the passing scenery. The anticipation of salt air and sunshine was a tangible thing in the car. When we arrived, the beach was already a vibrant tapestry of colorful towels and joyful shouts. The sun beat down with an enthusiastic warmth, turning the sand into a sparkling, golden canvas. We found a relatively quiet spot, a little removed from the loudest crowds, and began setting up our temporary camp. Beatrice, ever practical, pulled out the large bottle of sunscreen. "Who needs slathering?" she called out, already half joking, holding the bottle aloft like a prize. Sophia, with a gentle smile that reached her clear blue eyes, immediately offered to help Beatrice. "I can do your back, Mom," she said softly, using the affectionate term that Beatrice had encouraged. My mother gratefully accepted, turning her back to Sophia. I watched as Sophia carefully applied the lotion to my mother's shoulders and arms, her movements calm and considerate, almost methodical. My mom, always one for a good chat, kept up a steady stream of conversation about her latest gardening project, and Sophia listened patiently, occasionally offering a soft laugh or a thoughtful hum of agreement. Their interaction seemed easy, natural. A quiet thought formed in my mind, a tiny spark of opportunity. This was my chance. My back, usually shielded by oversized t-shirts or strategic towel placement, was feeling the sun's direct intensity. The thought of getting sunburnt on top of everything else was enough to propel me forward. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Sophia after she finished with Beatrice. "Sophia," I began, trying to sound casual, to mimic the easy familiarity she'd shown my mom. "Would you mind getting my back? It's impossible to reach properly myself." She looked up, her blue eyes meeting mine. For a split second, a flicker, quick as a hummingbird's wing, crossed her face. Was it surprise? Hesitation? I couldn't quite tell. But then, her sweet smile returned, perhaps a shade more fixed than before. "Of course, Eleanor," she said softly, reaching for the bottle without a moment's delay. "Happy to." Her voice was light, agreeable. I turned my back to her, trying to relax my shoulders, conscious of the expanse of skin I was exposing. Her fingers were light, almost hesitant at first, then smoothed the cool cream across my shoulders and down my spine. I could feel the gentle pressure, the cool slide of the lotion. It wasn't a vigorous rub like some people prefer. It was more of a delicate glide, careful not to press too hard. I tried to make small talk, asking her about her work as a graphic designer, a job she seemed to enjoy. She gave short, polite answers, brief descriptions of projects she was working on, without much elaboration. The interaction felt a little different, perhaps, from how she had been with my mom. There was a subtle restraint, a quietude that felt deeper than her usual soft-spoken nature. But I chalked it up to her quiet nature, perhaps a touch of shyness, and my own awkwardness about the whole back situation. I wasn't exactly thrilled to have my back on display, even to family. I thanked her warmly when she finished, and she simply nodded, a soft murmur of "you're welcome," before returning to her towel. The rest of the day was easy, flowing with the natural rhythm of a family beach trip. We ate sandwiches that Beatrice had packed, shared a thermos of iced tea, and took turns splashing in the gentle waves. Daniel and I even managed a clumsy game of beach paddleball, which ended predictably with the ball vanishing into the dunes. Sophia remained kind, attentive, offering her opinion when asked, and laughing at Daniel's silly jokes. There was no hint, no outward sign, that anything was amiss. The sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, casting long shadows over the retreating tide, and we packed up, tired but content. I went home feeling a pleasant ache from the day's activity and the usual post-beach calm. That evening, the beach day still a pleasant memory, a warmth in my mind, an unexpected shift in the atmosphere occurred. The phone rang, and it was Daniel. I answered, expecting his usual friendly warmth, perhaps a retelling of a funny moment from the day. But his voice was different. It was taut, a little clipped, and I immediately felt a prickle of unease, a premonition of something less than pleasant. He usually called just to chat, to share a funny story from his day, or to plan our next family get-together. This call felt different, heavier. "Eleanor," he started, without preamble, the casual greeting noticeably absent. "We need to talk about something." My heart gave a little thump, a sudden flutter of anxiety. "Okay, what's up?" I tried to keep my voice light, casual, hoping to diffuse whatever was coming, but a knot was already forming in my stomach, tightening with each second of silence from his end. There was a brief pause, a pregnant quietness that stretched between us, and I could almost feel his sigh on the other end of the line, heavy with unspoken frustration. "It's about Sophia," he said, and my stomach dropped. This was about Sophia. Immediately, my mind raced back to the beach, to our interaction. She told me she was really uncomfortable putting sunscreen on your back today. Uncomfortable? But she said she was happy to. She smiled. I had genuinely thought she was fine with it, that my brief moment of self-consciousness had passed without incident. My brow furrowed in confusion. Uncomfortable? But she didn't say anything, Daniel. She seemed perfectly happy to. She said, happy to. That's just it, Eleanor. Daniel's voice grew firmer, edged with a frustration I rarely heard directed at me. His usual patience seemed to have worn thin. Sophia has issues. A lot of issues, actually. She has pretty severe social anxiety. It's not something she talks about easily, but it's a constant struggle for her. She has a real problem saying no, especially when she feels put on the spot, or when she feels like she's going to disappoint someone. A wave of mortification washed over me, hot and stinging. Social anxiety. Of course. Why hadn't I seen it? Her quietness, the slight hesitation I'd dismissed, the quick glance away before she smiled, her brief answers. It suddenly clicked into place, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. Her polite acceptance, her gentle movements. It wasn't just shyness, it was a deeply ingrained difficulty with asserting her own boundaries. My face flushed, even though he couldn't see me, a blush of shame and belated understanding spreading across my cheeks. Then he said something that stung, something that cut deeper than the revelation about Sophia's anxiety. And honestly, Eleanor, his voice was cold now, edged with accusation. It was pretty inconsiderate of you to ask someone who isn't in healthcare to touch diseased skin. The words hung in the air, sharp and accusable, a sudden, unexpected assault. Diseased skin. My back, my insecurity, the very thing I tried so hard to hide and minimize, was suddenly laid bare and labeled with such a harsh, clinical term. It felt like a punch to the gut, a deliberate weaponization of my deepest vulnerability. My own self-consciousness, which I tried so hard to hide from the world, was not only exposed for its appearance, but for the supposed discomfort it caused others, branded as something repellent. "Daniel, that's unfair," I finally managed, my voice trembling slightly, a defensive tremor. The tears that pricked at my eyes were as much from indignation as from hurt. I didn't know about her anxiety. How could I have known? And it's not diseased skin, it's just acne. It's a skin condition, not a disease. I wouldn't have asked if I knew she was uncomfortable. You know I would never intentionally upset anyone, especially Sophia. The accusation of being inconsiderate, coupled with the blunt, almost cruel description of my skin, felt like a deliberate blow, designed to wound. "Well, you should have thought about it," he retorted, his tone unwavering, unyielding. He wasn't listening to my explanation, only doubling down on his anger. She came home really upset about it. She felt trapped. She didn't know how to say no without making a scene. And you put her in a really bad position, Eleanor. You just should have been more mindful. The conversation ended shortly after that, abruptly and unsatisfyingly, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth, a metallic tang of hurt and injustice. Daniel was clearly angry, fiercely protective of Sophia, and saw me as the unwitting villain in this scenario, oblivious to the emotional landmines around me. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange, potent mix of hurt, deep embarrassment, and a profound, unsettling confusion. The warmth of the beach day had been obliterated by the cold reality of Daniel's words. The days that followed were steeped in a strange, uneasy quiet. Sophia continued to be her sweet, gentle self whenever we interacted. She called Beatrice, chatted with me about trivial things like the weather or a new recipe she'd tried, always with that soft, polite demeanor, her voice even and calm. If she harbored any resentment or discomfort from that day, she hid it perfectly. She was a master of polite composure. But Daniel was different. It was subtle at first, a coolness in his voice when he answered my calls, a slight hesitation before he agreed to meet up for our usual coffee. Then it became more overt. He was cold, distant. His usual easygoing banter with me, the comfortable shorthand we shared, was replaced by short, clipped sentences, sometimes even outright silence if I tried to engage him in deeper conversation. He'd deflect my calls with excuses of being busy, or if he did answer, his voice lacked any warmth, any of the brotherly affection I was so used to. It was as if a wall had suddenly been built between us, sturdy and unyielding, constructed brick by brick out of his anger and perceived betrayal. I felt a profound sense of isolation. My own brother, usually one of my closest confidants, the person I could always rely on for an honest opinion, was now looking at me through a lens of judgment, seeing me as thoughtless, even cruel. I understood his protectiveness, I really did. He loved Sophia, and he was clearly upset that she had been distressed. I also knew, intellectually, that my request, innocent as it felt to me at the time, had genuinely caused emotional distress to someone he loved. But the accusation, the harshness of his words, especially about my skin, had cut deep, leaving a raw, open wound on my already sensitive self-image. It wasn't just about making Sophia uncomfortable, it was about being branded as someone who inflicted discomfort, someone who was not only flawed in appearance, but also in character. I considered talking to Beatrice, pouring out my heart, seeking her mediation. But I held back. I didn't want to cause more family tension, didn't want to drag her into what felt like a deeply personal conflict. And I wasn't sure what she could do anyway. This felt like something between Daniel, Sophia, and me, a knot that only we could unravel. So, I kept my hurt mostly to myself, letting it fester in the quiet hours of the night. I spent a lot of time replaying the beach scene in my head, an endless loop of self-interrogation. I scrutinized every detail, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I should have noticed Sophia's discomfort. Had her hand trembled when she took the bottle? Had her smile tightened just so? Had her gaze flitted away too quickly? In hindsight, every tiny detail felt loaded with meaning, every slight hesitation a blaring siren I had ignored. I chastised myself for my own lack of perception, for being so focused on my need for sunscreen, on my own embarrassment about my back, that I hadn't truly seen her, hadn't truly sensed the quiet struggle beneath her polite facade. I felt a pang of guilt that was almost physical. But then, the anger would simmer, a defensive heat rising in my chest. Why hadn't Sophia just said no? Why did Daniel feel the need to be so harsh, to use words that felt designed to wound, to cut me down? Why couldn't he have approached me with more understanding, explaining the situation gently instead of launching an attack? It was a messy tangle of emotions, guilt, anger, shame, and a deep sense of injustice, all churning inside me, making me restless and irritable. My own self-doubt, a constant companion, grew louder, whispering that I was indeed thoughtless, flawed. A week passed, then another, and the silence from Daniel, punctuated by brief, strained interactions, became unbearable. It felt like a growing chasm between us. Our usual routine of weekly calls, spontaneous meetups for coffee, sharing funny memes, all of it had ground to a halt. The absence of his easy presence in my life was a palpable ache. I knew I couldn't let this fester. This wasn't just about a tube of sunscreen. It was about a significant rift in my family, a relationship that I deeply valued. I knew I needed to apologize, truly apologize, not just for the act itself, but for the unwitting impact it had had on Sophia and, by extension, on Daniel. But I also knew I needed to articulate my own hurt, not as an excuse, but as a way to clear the air completely. I decided to go to their house on a Saturday afternoon. I texted Daniel first, saying I wanted to talk face-to-face, to hash things out. I kept it brief and neutral. I got no reply. The lack of response was a clear sign of his continued coldness, but I was determined. I packed a small bag of pastries from my favorite bakery, a peace offering, and drove to their place, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. When I arrived, my knuckles felt clumsy as I knocked on their front door. After a moment, Sophia answered, her eyes widening slightly in surprise when she saw me standing there. Her initial expression was one of polite shock, but then a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. "Eleanor, come in, please," she said, her voice soft as always, inviting me in. She seemed genuinely pleased to see me, which was a small comfort. Daniel was in the living room, engrossed in something on his phone. He looked up at the sound of the door, his expression immediately hardening when he saw me standing in the entryway. His brows furrowed and his jaw tensed. He didn't say anything, just watched me, his gaze unreadable, perhaps even wary. He didn't offer a greeting, didn't move. "Hi, Sophia," I began, my voice a little shaky despite my best efforts to project calm. "Daniel, can we talk for a minute?" I wanted to clear the air about something. Sophia nodded, looking from me to Daniel, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. She seemed to sense the tension, but her innate kindness kept her from retreating. Daniel sighed, a clear, audible sign of his reluctance, his frustration, but he didn't stop me. He simply leaned back against the sofa cushions, arms crossed over his chest, his posture signaling his defensive stance. I decided to address Sophia first. It felt right. She was the one who had been genuinely distressed. I looked directly at her, meeting her gentle gaze, trying to keep my voice steady, to convey the sincerity of my feelings. "Sophia, I came here because I need to apologize to you. Truly. About the beach. When I asked you to put sunscreen on my back, I had no idea it would make you uncomfortable. Daniel explained about your social anxiety, and, honestly, I feel terrible that I put you in that position. I never, ever would have asked if I'd known. I'm so sorry for causing you any distress." Sophia's eyes welled up slightly, and she wrung her hands, a nervous habit I now recognized. "Oh, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice barely audible, It's okay. Really. Please don't worry about it. I should have just said something. It's my issue, my problem, not yours. I'm trying to get better at it, but sometimes I just freeze." Her vulnerability was disarming, confirming everything Daniel had said and amplifying my regret. "No," I insisted gently, shaking my head. "It's my responsibility to be more aware, especially with people I care about. I should have been more observant. And I truly value you, Sophia, as Daniel's wife and as part of our family. I want you to feel comfortable around me always. Your comfort is important to me. I wanted her to know that my intentions had been good, even if my execution had been flawed. I then turned to Daniel, taking a deep breath. This was the harder part, addressing the hurt he had inflicted. And Daniel, I began, my voice regaining some firmness, but without accusation. I understand why you were upset. You were protecting Sophia, and that's exactly what a good husband does. It was right for you to stand up for her. I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes that I acknowledged his role, his motivation. But what you said to me, about my skin being diseased, that really hurt. And it wasn't fair. You know I struggle with it, and to have you, my brother, use those words, it cut really deep. It felt like you were trying to punish me, not just explain. Daniel looked down at his lap, his shoulders slumping slightly. The anger seemed to drain from him, replaced by a weary acknowledgement, a subtle admission of guilt. The tight set of his jaw softened. I know, Eleanor, he mumbled, his voice much softer, more like his usual self than I'd heard it in days. He looked up, his gaze meeting mine, and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. You're right. I shouldn't have said that. I was just so worried about Sophia, and I was so angry that she'd been upset that I reacted badly. I lashed out. I'm sorry, Elle. I really am. Sophia, sensing the emotional shift, the release of tension, gently placed a hand on Daniel's arm, a comforting gesture. It's all right, she repeated softly, her voice a balm. We all just got a bit tangled up. It was a misunderstanding, really. Her calm presence helped to defuse the last lingering sparks of tension. I looked at both of them, a profound sense of relief washing over me, light as a summer breeze after a storm. The knot in my stomach finally loosened. Can we just move past this then? I asked, my voice hopeful, wanting to seal the reconciliation. No more awkwardness? Can we go back to being us? Daniel looked up, meeting my gaze fully. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a shadow of his usual easy grin. He nodded, a genuine connection re-established. Deal, he said, and I knew, with a certainty that warmed me from the inside out, that we were okay. The wall was down. The air in the room, which had been thick with unspoken tension and unspoken hurt, suddenly lightened, became breathable again. Sophia even offered me a cup of tea, and we sat for a while, talking about mundane things, work, future family plans, a new movie release. But there was a newfound ease in the conversation, an honesty that hadn't been there before. It felt like a fresh start, a delicate rebuilding of trust. Over the next few months, our family dynamic slowly, subtly shifted. Daniel and I began to rebuild our easy rapport, our brother-sister shorthand. The teasing returned, the spontaneous calls, the comfortable silences. But there was a new layer of understanding beneath it all. He was still protective of Sophia, fiercely so, but perhaps a little less quick to jump to conclusions, and certainly more considerate in his language. He seemed to think before he spoke, especially when emotions ran high. We had an unspoken agreement now, a deeper respect for each other's vulnerabilities. My relationship with Sophia deepened in unexpected ways. Knowing about her anxiety didn't make her seem fragile. If anything, it made her seem incredibly brave, navigating a world that often demands quick responses and firm boundaries. I started paying closer attention to her subtle cues, the slight hesitation before she spoke, the way she might defer to Daniel. I began to offer her alternatives, or simply give her space when I sensed she needed it, without pushing. Sometimes I'd offer to help her with something, but always framing it in a way that gave her an easy out, a way to say no without pressure. She, in turn, seemed to relax around me, occasionally sharing a small, personal anecdote or asking for my advice on a graphic design project, something she would never have done before. Our conversations grew longer, more meaningful, extending beyond polite pleasantries. I saw her not just as Daniel's wife, but as a person, complex and courageous. The back acne, my silent companion, was still there. It hadn't magically vanished in the wake of the family reconciliation. It still flared up sometimes, and I still had moments of self-consciousness. But the sting of Daniel's words, diseased skin, had faded. The incident had forced me to confront my own vulnerability, yes, but it had also taught me an invaluable lesson about empathy, about looking beyond the surface, beyond what someone says or what appears to be. To truly understand what they might be feeling, what struggles they might be hiding beneath a polite smile. It was a messy, uncomfortable lesson, born from a tube of sunscreen and a quiet woman's hidden struggle, but it ultimately made our family stronger, more understanding, and more genuinely connected than before. It was a summer that began with a scar, not just on my skin but on my spirit, yet it ended with a healing that went far deeper than just my physical appearance. It was a reminder that true connection comes from seeing each other, flaws and all, with compassion and an open heart. And sometimes, the most challenging moments are the ones that lead to the most profound growth.